So this is the Photoshop tour presentation, and I created this to help you kind of have a walkthrough of all the different features that are available within Photoshop. So this is what Photoshop looks like when you open it up, and on the top of your screen that is called your menu bar. You could use, let's say, File to open a file or to create a new file. So these are all the different options in your menu bar. Over here, this is called your toolbar. And each of these symbols over here will give you a different tool. And if you hover your mouse on a symbol, the tool name will appear as well as a brief video. And if you click and hold some of the tools, a small menu will appear showing the other tools that are grouped together. So let me escape out, go into Photoshop, and if I press and hold over the paint bucket, I can see 3 other options are available. So if I want to use the paint bucket, I can click and dump. If I want to switch to the gradient tool, gradient. If I hover my mouse over it, it gives me a brief preview of what that tool does as well as a description. Just like if I did it over the brush tool, that's a soft edge brush or an eraser. These are all the tools that are hidden within that toolbar. And here's more. This is what we focused on or will be focusing on at some point during class, the gradient and paint bucket tool. We press G to quickly select that. We press B to quickly select the brush tool. This is keyboard shortcuts, so this will be available in Google Classroom for you to access throughout the class period, and it will also be projected during class so that you guys can get comfortable with your keyboard shortcuts. So these are some navigations. So by holding the space bar, it allows me to grab and move around my art. Control plus is zoom in, Control minus is zoom out, and Control 0 is fit to page. So let's try. So I'm going to come here, and I'm just going to draw something quick here so that you can see that I am actually zooming in. So here's a flower, okay? Now if I do Control plus, do you see how I'm zooming in? And then my hand becomes a space bar. I'm sorry, my hand becomes the grab tool when I hold down the space bar. See how I can move around? I could do Control minus and make it super small on my screen. That's it right there, that tiny thing. And then I can do Control 0 and it fits back to page. So these are different ways to navigate within your artwork. These other selection commands, we'll talk about those later. To adjust your brush size, that is really helpful. And these are brackets that are located next to the letter P on your keyboard. So when I come here, and this is my brush tool, if I want my brush to become larger, I'm just pressing a bracket next to the letter P. Now I can click, and I can have a large brush. I could even go in with my eraser and make it slightly smaller. Oops. Oh, it's because Mrs. Farrell didn't make a new layer. I need to make a new layer for this. So layer, new layer, B for brush, E for eraser. And do you see now I have a moon? Okay, so that's changing my brush size. Now this is where it gets a little complicated. So the cool thing about Photoshop is each tool has its own tool option bar, and that means that you can really specify what it is that you want your tool to do within Photoshop. So when I come here, I have my eraser, and when I look up here, if I click, it allows me to pick all these different styles for my eraser. So let's say instead of a hard edge brush, I want to use a soft brush. Now when I make my brush over here and I click, do you see how it's soft? Okay, it creates that gradual kind of blend. And then this is your opacity. So the higher the opacity, the more bold the change. The softer the opacity, the more subtle. So I'm not really seeing much of a change right now. Whereas if I go to 100, I'm seeing a dramatic change. Okay, so I'm going in my history to undo. If I come here to my gradation tool, which we've worked with, right, look at all these fun options that I have available up here for that. The same with my brush tool. Okay, this looks very similar to my eraser. Now, one thing that's super important when you're looking at your tools is you want to make sure that it is on normal. There's nothing wrong with switching the mode to something else to experiment, but if you're doing it unintentionally, it can be very confusing. So when I go to Photoshop, right now my mode is normal for this brush. If I switch it to, I'm trying to think of something, oh, dissolve, that's a good one to switch it to. Now watch what happens. Let me zoom in. Do you see how dissolve, that's not a clean line? I'm going to go to normal. Do you see the difference between the two? Okay. So when you're working, if your brush isn't creating what you want it to create or acting the way that you want it to act, like multiply. Oh, let me put a new color down so you can see what happens there. I think. So see multiply, how it isn't covering up the area, it's multiplying over. So that's, you just want to make sure that it's always on normal so that it acts the way that you want it to act. Okay? History menu is super helpful. The big word that you need to take away from this is that it only fixes your most recent mistakes. So inside here, I can go back and I can click up. Oops, let me zoom out so you can see. And you'll see that it ends up undoing my most recent mistakes. But it doesn't take it all the way back to the beginning, does it? So you have to make sure that you are clicking on your most recent, you undo your most recent mistakes. So let's say I don't want the moon, then all I do is just simply undo it. I don't go in and try and erase it or anything like that. So this is your history menu. Do you see all these? They disappear when I start to draw again. See? They disappear. Your layers menu is extremely important. Every new thing that you add to your artwork, you must add a new layer. You can edit each layer individually. So for example, you can move, copy, delete, or rotate that layer. So if I come here and I decide that I want to create a fish, all right? So I'm going to get my background layer is selected, and I'm going to get it to be 2 blues that I want to work with, and I'm going to do my gradient tool. Now I'm going to go on to this layer, and I'm naming it fish, and I'm going to make an orange fish. I'm going to do B for brush, make sure it's normal, and I want a hard edge because it's not a furry fish. And I'm going to use my bracket to make it larger. I'm going to click once. And now I can do Control T to scale it to the size that I want. And then I can do B for brush again. I'm going to scale it smaller. And then I can draw a fish. Okay, so here's my little fish. And then I will also give him an eye. All right, so here I have my fish. Now this part's really cool. I can right click and I can duplicate that fish. There's 2 layers here, but it only looks like one. Well, if I use my move tool at the top, I can move that fish. I could even Control T, scale that fish. I could even do Control T and flip the fish. I could even do Control T and rotate that fish so it looks like he's swimming in different directions. So it makes sense for you guys just to create one really well detailed item so that you can quick multiply it multiple times. So that's your layers menu. Again, you want to make sure that this is also set to a normal mode. So when I'm in Photoshop, I'm on this fish here. If I change him to darken, do you see how he acts different? So there's nothing wrong with playing around with these different filters if you would like to. But if something isn't acting the way that you want it to, before you raise your hand, check and see, is it on normal? So that is everything that we just talked about, which is a lot, I know, and it'll take time for you to understand it. But there's one more thing that I want you to be aware of, is your history and layers and toolbars are all windows. So when I am in Photoshop, if I don't have one of these open, I need to come up to Window and I need to open it. Do you see my layers is checked? Because my layers is open. My history does not have a check because it's not open, so I click on it. If it's floating, you click and drag it to where you want it to be in your toolbar. It doesn't matter if history or layers is on top or bottom, okay? And then over here, this is your toolbar. So if that's not available, you go to Window Tools and make sure that it's available. To create a new layer, remember you click here, or you can go up here to Layer, New Layer. This is your history to undo. So these are just some things that are really important in Photoshop that I wanted to give you guys an overview on. So when you do come in to work on your next project in here, you have a basic understanding of some of it. We will review the rest of this in class. What you're going to do now is you are going to go ahead and you're going to complete the questionnaire. I'm not trying to trick you guys. So every single question that is in this questionnaire is in order of the slideshow. And the slideshow is in order. Okay, so menu bar is the first question. Menu bar is the first question, and that is the first slide with a description. Okay, so go ahead and complete this, and then check in with me if you need help with anything. Good luck.